Hello and welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Steve Baris. Hey, Steve, how are you today?
I'm fine, thank you.
I wanted to start, I wanted to share some pictures of yours that I went online and found. So I've known
Mhm.
of your work for quite a while, but it was wonderful to just go in and actually, find a reason to select pictures.
Mhm.
Um, so you have quite a few on there that I wanted to talk about, but we only have so much time. I wanted to
Mhm.
start with this particular painting, and
Ah,
this is a painting.
correct.
Um, so a lot of times the works that I see of yours I come across are really sort of monochromatic. So I
Hmm.
really enjoyed this little bit of like this orangey reddy and this blue color kind of
Hmm.
combination. So I was curious. I wanted to first start and ask you about colors. And with a piece like this, is there some sort of like a symbolism to the colors, or was it just the color of the day?
No symbolism, so I can get that one off the table.
Okay.
I mean, colors function. I think they function with me. I mean, there's no question there's an emotional attachment to combinations that I feel, but they're very difficult to explain that to
Hmm.
anyone. So to keep it on the more um, surface level, I guess, is that they just function as differentiating each other, right? You can't have a blue next, I mean, you could have a blue next to a blue, but in this particular series, it was very important that the different bars, if you will, or lines, interacted with each other as separate individuals, and they can't be separate in this case without separate coloration.
When
Now, again, that's not the whole of the story, but I'm just saying that's
right.
probably the quickest answer for you.
I'm kind of curious. When I first encountered your work, I really saw it as um, ideas based on landscape and maps. I mean, that was
Uh-huh.
my first take on
Uh-huh.
it. So that's why I was asking you about color, because oftentimes when you have a source material that is a map or an actual structure, color sometimes can refer to certain things. But on this case, what you're telling me, it's the color was the color.
Well, yeah. I mean, the color's the color in that case. Like I say, it's not that simple because color is just such a deeply emotional thing. And if you were to see me painting, you would literally see my body twisting a lot. I
Okay.
physically twist to try to get or to respond to what I've just done. What does that make me feel like? So there's clearly an emotional part going on. Like I say, it's harder to explain. But your thing about the landscape, there's no question. Nothing's referring to a particular landscape at all. However, the idea of landscape, and I'd say more specifically, the idea of mapping landscapes is very front and center for me in this
Hmm.
body of work. It's really about enacting, if you will, symbolically, sort of a process of navigation across different planes, if you will, and the disruptions and the detours and all. To me, this is a stand-in, I guess, for that experience that we all experience from time to time. So it's not so much landscape, but a mapping of a landscape.
I wanted to also have one question about this piece because I often love to talk about process just because I
Mhm.
find it often gives an insight into what the artist was thinking.
Sure.
So uh, let me indulge myself here for just a minute. In a piece like this, when you're crafting it, I don't think it just pops out. I assume that there are variations. Are you ever working with, say, like collage to begin with to get the structure, or is it done with drawings, or how do you eventually come by this?
Yeah, good question. Definitely not collage. Sometimes drawing, sometimes, but I would say first and foremost, I see myself as an improvisational painter in the sense of, in fact, I always brought this up with my students when I used to teach, I'll be quick here. Classical music deals with a score, and a good musician takes that score and interprets it, but the score is still the score before the music is played, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Improvisation we associate with jazz, completely different principle. Have no idea where it's going to go, and it's really a call and response within different people. In my case, it's a call and response with myself. So
Hmm.
I'm usually just throwing things there, then responding to it and changing. Now, this series itself, however, did have some drawing. I did drawings ahead of time on this, but again, they were only places to start as opposed to it was never going to be that as the final piece.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I'm constantly painting over, for example. For me,
Hmm.
erasure happens by painting over.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. And the reason I brought up collage was, in particular, is the way you did the green shifts in the background, and it almost looked like on the right hand side you have the orange and the blue. Looks like they were shifted, so it looks like they started, but it looks like a
Uh-huh.
collage technique on it. So
Yes.
that's why I was asking about it.
Yeah, no, that's a good observation. It does have that. Collage will do that naturally, right? So, but
Yeah.
in my case, I can't do anything the easy way. I have to struggle, all that stuff.
If it was easy, you wouldn't want to do it, right?
I would
Uh,
not actually. I'd be bored and I would do something else.
so I wanted to also show this piece from a different series.
Yeah.
I love these sort of heavy dark blacks, and I
Hmm.
love the suggestion of dimensionality on these. I think is fantastic. But
Hmm.
my real question is actually on the materials.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I noticed that you did, especially within series itself, is you would switch your mounts. So I think this a drawing, or is this a is it
Painting,
this is a
oil
painting.
on,
So
probably on Mylar, but whatever. Yeah.
well,
Hmm.
that was actually my question. So I've seen that you've done oil on canvas,
Hmm.
mylars, and acrylics.
Correct.
Is there a reason for switching between those mounts?
Oh, yeah. First of all, canvas initially is there for scale.
Okay.
Mylar, I've tried taking it up large. There's a limit. It's difficult, hard to frame.
Hmm.
Uh, Canvas, plexiglass is hard to scale up because that becomes expensive and very heavy and
Hmm.
difficult for other reasons. Canvas is just a beautiful, I'm not the first one to have discovered that canvas
Right.
is
So it's
great.
economic, right?
It's a little practical economic. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And in fact, I prepare my canvases in such a way to bring that surface close to what I would call the quick surface of a mylar
So
or a
you're doing like gesso and sanding and multiple layers to get it that
yeah, yeah.
smoothness.
I use like a molding paste, for
Yeah.
example. I have my techniques, but really in other words, I'm not really interested in the weave of the canvas like a lot of people are. I want
Right.
it.
Right.
And when I say fast, I mean I do a lot of subtractive work. If you were to see me, I often have a kind of a tool, like a blade, like someone is doing, walls, plastering, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And rags are everything to me because I'm wiping off. So I'm often putting stuff on only to wipe it back off. So all
Yeah.
these edges were there by subtracting. Well, a Mylar is great because it's so smooth, I can
Right.
just and I have to make my canvases do the same thing. So that is why canvas is there. Now, Mylar has been kind of my go-to material for years and years and years. And I like it for the reason I just said. It's a fast surface, but I
Right.
also like it because in that case, it's translucent. It's frosted mylar, actually. And that allows the light to penetrate the material and bounce back out. So
Yeah.
therefore, it gives you a completely different sort of pictorial space, if you will, because whereas a canvas or most surfaces, the light only bounces off the surface. And mylar, it actually penetrates
Right.
in why most things are transparent paint to allow that penetration and bounce back. And now plexi, which by the way, I almost never work with oil on plexi, or you said acrylic, different ways people, but I work with acrylic paint on
Hmm.
acrylic. Okay, on that one for other reasons, but plexi, just like mylar, same thing. It's transparent. It allows the light to come back through. It's a fast surface, so those two are like that. Yep.
I was kind of curious with Mylar because I've done work on Mylar myself a lot with inks. Are you ever worried about the permanence of Mylar? Like, do you? It's because it breaks down over years.
Well, it depends on them. There's so many different Mylars. I mean, when you think about there's Mylar balloons, right? Well,
Right.
obviously I'm not going to work on that, but there They're under a general heading. I'm not a chemist, so I can't give you a molecular formula here, but I should point out, and this is an interesting little fun fact for me, is right out of graduate school in the late 80s, I got lucky enough to get selected for, well, it's called selections at the Drawing Center in New York,
Mhm.
which they may still do those 3 or 4 a year, maybe. They get about 10, 12 people. Anyway, at the time, they brought in a conservator from the Metropolitan Museum, and the artists were able to ask questions, right? And everything I had in that show was Mylar. Okay.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, I started Mylar because I used to be a printmaking major and I was working with Mylar for Mylar lithography. And then I just
Mhm.
fell in love with
Mhm.
Mylar. But anyway, I posed that very question, and that person was very positive about at least the type of Mylar I was using, that its archival future is probably no different than about any other archival future, if I could put that.
Yeah.
In other
Yeah.
words,
I mean,
nothing
I've
lasts
seen papers
forever,
age
right?
horribly.
Nothing lasts forever, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So you can't compare it for eternal permanence. You have to
Yeah.
compare it to reality. So that I'm just saying that was a beautiful moment for me because now I had an expert sort of saying, "You're okay, buddy. Just keep doing it."
Right. Yeah. Well, somebody's got to keep this conservators in business, right?
And also just to slip one more thing, because I have been doing Mylar for so many years, guess what? I have old pieces that have been around now for quite a
Oh,
while,
yeah. So
decades.
you're your
So
own
I
test
have,
study.
yeah, and honestly, nothing has nothing is wrong with them. And that
Okay.
paint, by the way, I've had cases where I don't even know why I would have done this, where I tried to remove the paint by sanding, and I had to work hard.
Hmm.
None of that paint was going to just lift easily. So to me, I feel very confident that it's good.
Good. I got to come see the older works and check it out because I've got some disaster Mylar stuff that didn't hold up. I was probably using the wrong stuff. So
Well, well, can I add one more thing to
sure.
all those listeners who want to do what Stevie does?
Sure.
I never put oil straight on Mylar.
Yeah.
I would never do that because I think
It'll just eat it.
it'll eat it. I always put clear acrylic base on before I ever put, so that needs to be mentioned as well.
So I wanted to, I've got a couple more pictures I want to get through, but I definitely wanted to ask you about this one.
Hmm.
This one just looked fun to make, right? I
Yeah.
love the idea that you have these sort of shelving
Hmm.
units that are there. So you got the support structure, but the color and they just this one just looks jovial. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, no.
please tell me this was fun to make. This one.
It was fun to make. In fact,
Okay.
everything's fun to make. Otherwise, I wouldn't make it.
Okay.
I'm not saying every moment of making these things was actually filling me with joy,
Right.
but let's just put it this way. When I get up in the morning, go in the studio, I always want to be, anticipating joy, and I certainly anticipated joy in this series. Yes, if I could put it that way.
I
Yeah.
I really love it. I wanted to show one of these to show scale because I think your work kind of suffers from the same thing mine does is when you have it just the image, it's hard for people to actually judge the
Yeah.
size or so a piece like this and I have there's a drawing sort of a corresponding piece to it. um,
Uh-huh.
I thought it was wonderful just to see the scale. Let me go back to that particular.
Hmm.
So
Sure.
this is also done. This is on Mylar as well.
Correct. Hmm.
So this is really. Do you consider these really like drawings or constructions, or what in your mind? What are
Ah, boy, that whole drawing painting thing is a forever.
they?
I guess the fancy scientific or mathematical word would be a fuzzy set or fuzzy
Okay.
set,
All
right?
right.
There's a lot of fuzz between them. I always just refer to them as paintings, just because the
Okay.
way I apply it is like a painter would apply it. So,
Because I
but they
just see them as
could be a
drawings.
drawing.
Yeah.
Well, they could be a drawing too. Again, it's really a categorical
Yeah.
problem there, not
Go
not
into
it.
constructions or whatnot.
Hmm.
Oops. Sorry, we went too far there. Yes, let's go to this particular piece. So
Hmm.
at what point, or maybe you've always done it, did you throw away the rectangular surface in hopes of these constructed shaped canvases or these? as
Yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah. Good, exactly, precisely. I think this might be on wood. There's
Okay.
some of this series was actually on wood, so we can add wood to my
Okay. Right.
the
I'll
substrates.
go
All
back and
right.
edit that in.
But
Was this
whatever.
always something there, or was it because of the shapes that you work with? Did it pull you into that direction?
Shapes what I work with, probably what's pulled me. Again, I can't be that specific because I don't remember, all the stages of my thinking. But yeah, I think it's more like that. Although I'm always very fascinated with breaking off of rectangles. I
Mm,
mean, question, I live and die on rectangles all the time, but
right.
sometimes I get weary of that and like to push things. And this series was and again, the word fun you use is a very fun way of pushing it. But there's no question this jump cut series, because that's
Yep.
really what this was called. um, by the way, I usually title my stuff in series.
Yep.
I don't want to leave an untitled, but I
Right.
don't want to come up with a fancy or any kind of title every time I do a piece. So I just have a
Hmm.
series and then I call it with a letter, it usually refers to the substrate size, blah, blah, blah. So
Hmm. Hmm.
this was a
So
jump.
actually, it leads me to this. I just want to show this one last piece.
Yeah.
Um, this was a stunner piece. I really thought this was wonderful in terms of the layering that you did. But my
Hmm.
question actually does go with series because it was wonderful to see the different variations as you work through your ideas in the series. Do
Hmm.
you have a like how, how do you know the easiest way to put this? How do you know when a series is done? Or are your series not done? Do you ever revive them years later?
Yes to that last question. In other
Okay.
words, I never consider a series forever done, even though it may well be. And at some point, a century from now, they'll look back. Oh, yeah, turns out he was finished back in
Right.
1993. But I have definitely revived them. I don't ever, in other words, if I leave it, it's because I'm weary of it or I'm running out of good ideas to keep it going. So it's time to
Okay.
move on. I'm starting to get bored. And
Right.
that's right. So, but yeah, no, I come back sometimes.
Do you work on more than one series at a time, or is it
Yeah, I do. I do. I
okay?
mean, usually there's one dominating, and certainly if a big exhibition coming up, it'll definitely dominate.
Okay.
But yeah, I can have more. And for example, that first painting you showed, the big one with all
Hmm.
the colors and stuff like that, that's never the same space twice is the series name for that. That
Okay.
is the one series immediately before the one I'm focusing on now. All right. Um, but I'm not done with that series at all. In fact, I constantly thinking, it's time to reopen that one because I don't feel like I never felt like I let it dry, if you
Hmm. Do you
crazy
ever
phrase.
do you work on multiple pieces at the same time,
Very
or you?
much. I have to because I just can't stay on one thing that long. I have to,
So,
and
do you work on multiple series at the same time as well?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. All right.
definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I mean,
I wanted to.
probably not more than two, but
Yeah.
I doubt if it's been three and certainly not four, but certainly two at a time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Like a juggler.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because again, like I say, I quickly get bored with what I'm doing in the moment, and then okay, let's just put that over and go over here now. Yeah.
I wanted to start this section with I love diving into people's early starts in art because I find that it's often very revealing. Um,
Mhm.
so, my first question to you is like, how long have you actually been making art? When did you
I,
start?
better way of putting it, at least in my case, is how long have I self-identified as an artist, right?
Okay.
And there the answer goes back to everybody's childhood. I mean, everyone is an artist for a while, right? As little kids,
Mm-hmm.
they're the best. We all have to agree on that one. But then sadly, they move on and they stop doing it for many reasons. And
Right.
I was one of those people. There's others out there, obviously, that never stopped. Okay. So I was
Sailed
always an
on
artist.
through. Right.
And then I became what that means as a kid, let's say in middle school, whatever, that point in your life, that's when basically people are dropping off that wagon, no longer doing it. Whereas I was good at drawing. And then, I impressed friends and classmates because I could draw well.
Right.
I
It's a good
was
party
highly,
trick.
I was highly influenced by Mad Magazine at that time in my life. And I
Yeah, you're
would
not the only
basically,
artist I've talked to like that.
yeah, and I would, you know, do initially copying all those great Mort Drucker, especially remember the name Mort Drucker
Mm-hmm.
satires or whatever of movies and stuff like that, and how he did with figures, the cross hatching, and all that kind of stuff. And then I would do the same thing, and then I started doing the thing to make fun of teachers,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh.
make these things pass them around. It became a thing.
Uh-huh,
Okay,
uh-huh.
so you could see my stock went up as being an
Right,
artist.
right. You got attention from it. So I wasn't going to ask this question, but I have to now. Do you have an earliest memory of being exposed to art, like a first
Well,
painting in your head or something?
there's a little history that has to be brought into that question.
Okay.
Even though my parents are from New York, they moved to the West, and I literally grew up on Indian reservations my entire life until I went to
Ah,
college. Extremely remote. I mean,
okay.
really, like 200 or 300 people in the middle of the Great Plains of Montana, for example. So the only time I was, and no one, my family are full of kind of scientists, mathematic people, you
Uh-huh.
know, it's an oddball. I didn't have any other influences other than Mad magazines that came every
Okay.
month. But every 3 or 4 years, I'd go back east to go see the family. Then there would be some culture, right?
Huh.
So really, okay, it's not the first painting, but one that highly influenced me because one of my uncles was an art collector. He sent me a book of Soutine. And by this
Okay.
point, I was probably maybe a freshman in high school at
Uh-huh.
this point in my life. And up until then, I was just doing really boring landscape copies off whatever postcard I could find. I mean,
Right.
really, I think low class stuff. Okay. When I got that Soutine book, I like went crazy. Oh my God. And suddenly I be emulated Soutine for a while. So to answer your question, I guess I'm going to pin it to Soutine,
Poutine. That's fantastic. Well,
which is an
looking at
odd thing to have in the middle of nowhere, Montana. Is
right,
all I
right, and it
can
just pops up. Now I'm going to be going back to your work and looking at where does Soutine pop into.
Well,
Speaking of
hang
other
in there.
artists, the one artist I really wanted to bring up because I want to ask you if uh, not only is this a potential reference, so I can't help but think of Cholita when I
Mhm,
when I look at your work, and I was kind of curious. Have you've done some sculptural element kind of
mhm.
pieces, but I haven't come across anything that would be just pure sculpture. Is there a drive for you into that vein?
Yeah.
Am I not seeing it?
There is a drive, and
Okay.
I'm aware of that his work, which I like a lot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Gorgeous.
And I am very much a drive. I just haven't yet found my way to. In other words, you could have a drive, you could desire this and desire that, but if you don't
Right.
find a pathway to it,
Right.
you know, you don't need to get it tomorrow, but you need to have a path to it, a step and then another and another. And I do play with steps all the time. Uh, but the path hasn't gone past 2 or 3 steps, and I need 20 more.
Are some of those steps actually like drawing out the sculptural ideas? Has it gotten to that point?
All the time, all the
Okay.
time. I just constantly get these crazy idea and I'll draw it. Wow,
So let
brilliant.
wait, let me ask you this. With your pieces, should I be thinking of them as dimensional objects when you're
Nope.
doing your drawings? No? Okay.
Not the pieces you're showing here, other than the obvious dimensional. I mean, those odd shaped things clearly are dimensional in the sense that they are three-dimensional forms. You can see them as 3D forms. They're
Right.
objects, right? But they're not sculptured around, that's for sure. But I do think of that as well, and I'm just constantly playing. I'm toying with things. I'll experiment, and then I'll just, well, not cutting it, not cutting it.
Do you keep a sketchbook?
I have many of them.
Okay. Does Are they decipherable or is it like just your handwriting like nobody knows what this is?
A little bit of both. A little bit of
Okay.
both.
All
Yeah,
right.
mix.
And I guess the follow-up question for that on the back end is when you've made works, do you ever completely leave it alone, or are you the kind of artist that's like, nope, this needs to be destroyed or reworked, or even after years?
Okay. Little both again.
Okay.
There's no, I mean, I go into purge mode from time to time. I really
Yeah.
do. Uh,
Who
you
doesn't?
know, I mean, I don't know about you, but there's nothing more depressing when a whole lot of artwork gets sent back to you from a gallery. All
Yeah,
right. And
there should be a
suddenly,
name for that. I'm sure in German there is.
well, there's the physical problem, like what the hell am I going to do with
Right.
all this? But they're just a depressing part. Oh God,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
whatever. And that usually, I have to be careful of this because I over purge. And that usually sets me off into a purge mode where I'll suddenly get rid of it, get rid of it. Now, canvases I will not tear up because I'll usually paint over. And fortunately, because I work with very thin paint,
Mhm.
I'm not captured by an older regime, if you will, of textures, right? And so really I'll sand them and start to paint over them. But other stuff, Mylars, are you kidding? I mean, I've just yeah. In fact, just a funny little story back. Actually, this has happened twice, but I'll just refer to one. Back when we used to live in Northern Liberties, you put,
Mhm.
like Philadelphia, you just put your garbage out,
Right.
on the street and no biggie. And could be piles of the stuff and they'll just pick it all up, right? Anyway, at one point I was in one of those purges and I had all these rolls of my old Mylar that I was disgusted with, and I just threw them out there. And
Mhm.
then maybe a couple years later, I went to a party in the neighborhood in somebody's house and I saw Mylars on the wall. And after that, I thought, no, you can't do that, Steve.
Yeah,
Gotta
right.
cut them up.
Well, it's
Um,
funny you should admit, that same thing has happened to me too, and it's been
uh-huh.
embarrassing. Like I threw that
Yeah,
out for a reason. So,
right. Oh yeah,
um,
no, I will definitely repaint from time to time for sure.
okay.
Definitely.
So we have time for just uh, a quickie question and two regular questions. My quickie question to you that I need to get answered is: I saw on your website you do uh, prints, digital prints
Yeah,
of
uh-huh.
some of your works. Are they editioned or are they just one-offs?
Well, what I've done, again, I used to be a printmaker. I actually graduated as my MFA is in printmaking from Tyler. Okay,
Okay,
and but fortunately nowadays with digital, what I'll do is I'll say addition of 10, but as
yeah,
they're as needed now, so you
right.
don't waste all this paper like in the old days.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean they're usually an addition of something, probably 10. I don't want a huge number, and I know almost in most cases we won't even get past one or two in terms of.
I do the
Um,
same thing, so I'm there with you. Um, uh, one serious question, one more fun question. Serious question is: do you consider your works to be autobiographical in nature at all, or are you trying to make works that are separate from your life?
Man, that's a good question. I mean, the short answer is no in a direct way. They're not. I mean,
Okay,
honestly, if I said they were autobiographical and everyone was just looking at the images you just put up there, they're going to scratch their heads. What's he saying? I mean, on the other hand, absolutely they're autobiographical in the sense that I'm processing experiences of a life like everybody
right,
else.
right,
And my autobiography is absolutely part of it. So in that regard, yeah, they're autobiographical, but they're certainly not a narrative of an
right.
autobiographical thing.
Time for just one final question. Question I ask all artists: what does making art do for you?
Hmm. Well, joy for sure. Boy, I don't. Wow, you just stunned me on that one. Aren't those simple questions the one that throw you?
Right.
I don't know what I would do if I didn't do it, right? I mean, it's a way of being that is just really better than all the options.
That's
That's
fair
all I
enough.
could, yeah, that's all I could say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm never trying to stump anybody with that question, but
No, no,
everybody kind of
no,
is.
it's a very straightforward question. I don't know
Very
why it took
simple.
so much to answer that one, but anyway, yeah.
Well, Stephen, I can't thank you enough for coming by and talking with me today. It's great. Now I gotta, put me on that email list. I gotta come to the
I
next
will.
show. I gotta come see some of these works in person. So, but again, thank you for spending the time with me today to talk to me about your work. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me on here. It's great.
Pleasure. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in to watch Art Show today. We really appreciate your support, especially if you can like and subscribe. That helps push Art Show out to more people. So please like and subscribe when you get a chance. And if you have any questions for Stephen, you can always stick them in the comments section, or I will pass them on if I can't answer them. We're thrilled that you're watching Art Show, and we want to make sure that you keep going and watch additional artists that we have on Art Show because we've got a lot of artists to talk about. So again, thank you very much, Stephen. I appreciate it. You have a
Thank you.
great day today. Take care.